everyone, and thank you so much for giving up time to be with us this afternoon for what I hope will be a very interesting discussion. A few familiar faces and some other faces that I don't know, but I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say. Just a few remarks from me before we get started, and then Becky's going to give a little bit of the context to this whole process. I'm sure many of you will know plenty about that already, and then we'll open up the discussion and contributions from everybody. So my intention is that we use this time to hear from everybody, and that we try as far as possible to have a good discussion, in other words, response to what people say and so on. And also, if possible, that we keep to the main issues and we address the questions that, well, the main questions. If those are the questions that we've circulated already, that's great. If you think they're not, well, obviously you're the experts and we want to hear about that. So my proposal is that we'll give everybody to start with 2 minutes, and that's your 2-minute opportunity, your platform to address the questions would be great, or raise any issues, or tell us what the question should be, whatever the main thing is that you think you want to contribute to the discussion to get going. And then when we've heard from everybody, we'll open it out to the normal process of discussion where people can raise hands. I'm not quite sure that the technology is completely straightforward in terms of Zoom and hand raising. I certainly haven't got it on my application here, but as there are a group that I think I can see everybody on the screen, then we can actually just raise a hand in that way, and either I or Gemma or Becky or somebody will see that hopefully and bring you in. If you haven't got your camera on, then you can put something in the chat, and again, one of us will see that and bring you in. So that's how I hope that can work. Let me also say that the plan is to record this discussion. That's really just so that we make sure we capture everything that everybody says, and would just be used for that purpose. And I hope everybody's okay with that. And if anybody has any objection, this is the moment to say. And if you don't say, I'm going to take that as consent. Thank you very much. So the 2 minutes then, I will try to be quite strict about this because I think it will take us well more than half of our time just to give everybody 2 minutes. I know it's not very much. Think of it as an Oracy challenge, if you like, to condense your wisdom, which I know is much, much bigger than could possibly be put into a 2-minute short statement. But that's the challenge that you've been set. I hope you can rise to the challenge. And just to remind you again, the 3 broad questions that we set out, which I hope are the right questions for this discussion. The first is about really what we should be assessing, and particularly how we should be assessing under the heading of Oracy. So are there particular parts or particular methods that we can use? The second broad question is about the school's role and responsibilities in that. How should schools be encouraged or supported to promote Oracy, and in particular the assessment of Oracy, I guess. And then the third is, I think, for me, a really knotty one, which is about essentially the pros and cons of having a statutory assessment or a high stakes assessment, or the other kinds of pressures that come with different assessments that are incentivized or pressurized in different ways. And thinking about the intended consequences, but I guess the harder ones are the unintended consequences that often aren't quite what we hoped they would be. Okay, so hopefully that's enough to get us going on that. And I'm going to hand over to Becky just to make some introductory comment, or just to give us the background, I guess, about what the process is and where we are in that process. Becky.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, welcome everybody. Great to have everybody on board. I know some of you were at the roundtable last week on teacher development and Oracy, and as I explained then, the kind of purposes of these get-togethers, these gatherings, are as we reach the end of the inquiry. And for those of you who haven't been involved until this stage, this has been going on for some time, lengthened by the unfortunate coincidences of a general election and then COVID. So we've been grappling with these issues for some time, and in doing so, we've taken a huge amount of evidence from both across the teaching profession and from experts and others like yourselves and the kind of key decision makers within the education system. And there have been emerging themes that have come up strongly from that evidence that people feel very strongly about, or where there is quite a range of views. And as we try to get to the point of having a set of recommendations that we can put in the final report, which a date for your diary is due to launch on the 28th of April, and you will all receive an invite to that launch. We've been trying to sort of dive into some of those areas that were particularly rich and particularly controversial, particularly well discussed and raised by those giving evidence, and just have an opportunity to really unpick those issues a little bit further. So that's the purpose of today. It is a kind of final stage, so we're really interested to hear absolutely your thoughts, but also your ideas about sort of ways forwards and recommendations that can really help to inform the final report. And on the specific issue of kind of the whole assessment and everything that we've tried to pack into this one short session, it did very much come through as a feature of lots of the evidence that was given in a variety of different forms, and there was a mixed set of views around it. And we've recently done some polling as well of teachers, and again, from that has emerged a mixture of views about the type of assessment, how, where and when and in what ways and for what purpose. And I think that's absolutely to be expected. And as I referenced last week, I have been regularly diving back into my well-thumbed copy of the Bullock report over the last 6 months. And there's a really, big section in there about the difficulties of assessment of Oracy and its place and its role and what's its purpose and where should it sit and what kind of learning should it support and drive. And so these are not new questions, and we understand that, and we understand that within this room there is a huge range of expertise of people who've been thinking about this really, really deeply that can't be summed up in 2 minutes. But we hope that we can kind of build on that and build forward from it, rather than necessarily going back and rehearsing every argument from past. What is the opportunity of this moment now, and what would we like to see the position looking like as we go forward, and what's important to hold on to within that. So yeah, brilliant. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to sit back and listen. So thanks very much, and back to you, Rob.
Thanks, Becky. That's really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to ask, I've got a sort of pseudo-random order of people based on what I can see on my screen. I'm going to start with Neil, please. Neil Mercer, your 2 minutes starts now.
Okay, thanks very much. With that hesitation, so on. I'm going to say my 2 minutes based on 3 questions that people, mainly teachers, ask me about the assessment of Oracy, and they are these. Is the assessment of Oracy worth pursuing? To which I say yes, because unless young people's speaking and listening skills are assessed, teachers cannot properly determine what skills any particular students need to develop. A child may be a good speaker but a poor listener, or vice versa. They may be great at making a presentation but not so good at working in a group, because students' Oracy profiles differ. Secondly, it's important because the way education systems work, sadly, is that unless a subject is assessed, it's not given priority. Less space is to be found for it in the crowded curriculum. This isn't the fault of teachers, but of the accountability systems they have to work with. For example, we know that primary science was given less time once the science SATs were removed. So unless Oracy skills are assessed in the way that literacy skills are, they'll always be the poor relation and will be given less attention. Secondly, people ask me, is it possible to identify the range of skills involved in using spoken language effectively, which you have to do if you're going to assess them? And I would say yes. We've achieved this with the Cambridge Voice 21 Oracy Skills Framework, which involves some of the people who are here today in its creation. So I think we know we can do that. Thirdly, what are the main obstacles to introducing more formal assessment of Oracy? Well, one is that it's harder to gather evidence for making assessments, partly for technical reasons than is the case for reading and writing. Recorded talk is awkward stuff to handle. Also, spoken language use normally involves more than one person. So individual assessment tasks are harder to design and individual performance is harder to isolate. And another problem is we lack age-related norms for Oracy development, which exist, for example, for reading. But I think these obstacles can be overcome. The fourth obstacle, I think, which is hardest to overcome, is that educational policymakers just do not, at least in the UK, do not seem to think that developing most young people's oracy skills is as important as developing their literacy and numeracy skills. And that's one reason oracy isn't assessed. But they're wrong. That's me, finished. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That was a model lesson in oracy, I think, for all of us. Well done. Really clear and really succinct. Okay, I'm going to ask Helen next. Helen Drury.
Hi everyone. I'm confident that I can't beat that or come anywhere near it. But yeah, so I'm from ARC, and we create complete curriculum programs and support over 700 schools to implement them. And I think one of the kind of key bits of evidence and experience that inform my response to the questions is the impact that over the last decade, us giving kind of age-related expectations around speaking and listening in maths has made, and that's been really quite phenomenal. So the I guess that the clarity of an expectation for a teacher of what children of different ages might be capable of could make an enormous difference, I think, to the quality of teaching of oracy. And I think it's more around that. However, that exemplification may well be a consequence of trying to develop assessment, whether that's low stakes or high stakes. And so I think that's the main thing to pursue. And it's been kind of looking at not only what subject specific vocabulary different children at different ages might be expected to have, but also the sentence stems and language structures that they might use and the reasoning that they might use from sort of a very young age all the way through. And so I think the other thing I did want to mention in my 2 minutes was that there's a potential model in the non-statutory DFE guidelines for primary mathematics, the ready to progress criteria, where they've said for each primary year group what the key kind of conceptual understanding and skills should be for those pupils. And they're not accompanied by high stakes assessment, although they do, of course, lead on a trajectory to year 6 SATs. But I think that might be something worth considering as a potential way of approaching assessment guidance in oracy.
Thank you very much. You so far setting the bar very high in terms of concise, succinct and relevant, useful comments. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Robin next, and then just so you have a warning, Tina after that. So Robin, please. I can't hear you, Robin. Can other people hear?
I think you're muted, Robin.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I was in a Zoom meeting yesterday and you did that again. I want to start by questioning the reduction or the danger of questioning the reduction of oracy to a single skill or a skill set. The capacity to use spoken language to articulate and communicate entails dispositions and feelings too, and it's influenced by personality and context. And of course, talk is about something. So it depends critically as well on the speaker's knowledge and understanding of what is being spoken about. And further, being intrinsically interactive, what the student says is in part shaped by what the teacher or another pupil says. So when we assess oracy, what exactly are we assessing? And furthermore, whom are we assessing? Then there's the matter of reliability. And I'm sure Peter will have something to say about this. One of the questions is, can oracy skills be reliably assessed? Start by factoring in the teachers or other pupils' roles in the particular capacity we're seeking to assess. Then factor in the high incidence in many urban schools of EAL children. Then factor in SLCN, noting that in the Berko follow-up report, they said that perhaps 1.4 million children in the UK have speech, language, or communication needs of a kind that need proper diagnosis and provision. In the light of all this and more, we really have to proceed with considerable caution. And we have to warn those who say that all it takes is a simple test to do likewise. And in this context, there are two dilemmas, and Neil has already alluded to one of them. We want policymakers to take Oracy more seriously, but if they do so without proper understanding, we could end up with the imposition on schools of a crude and counterproductive view of what the development of spoken language is about. And we also know that if something is going to be tested, schools will tend to give it time and attention. So the idea of statutory Oracy assessment might seem to help our cause. But we also know how the prospect of such statutory assessment can seriously distort competence, communicative confidence